So in my most recent video, I went over the best Valor Stone farm in the War Within, and while doing this on a bunch of different characters, I realized that this is very good for farming up Warbound gear for all of your alts. And not only is this just good for getting a bunch of random items, but because of the loot pool you're pulling from in this farm, you can also get some of the strongest trinkets currently in the game. And this revolves around farming Zekvir, which is basically the final delve in season 1. There's 2 different difficulties, and the first one, which is the one we're going to be farming, you'll have to go and progress up to tier 8 delves, and once you're at that point, you can then go face Zekvir on his first difficulty. And even though he is the equivalent of a tier 8 delve just in a singular boss, he is actually a lot easier to kill and farm than you may realize. And because it's only this one boss, you can actually farm it pretty quickly. A around 6-10 character can farm this boss in probably 2 minutes, and that includes the time of re-entering the delve and looting the chest at the end. So killing the boss itself at even 6-10 item level will take a minute or a little over a minute, and once you kill this boss, there's 2 chests that you loot, and both of those chests can give you random Warbound gear. And if you want some tips on how to make this fight much easier, I would recommend checking out my previous video. But if you're doing this farm to try to get a bunch of gear for other alts, you'll probably be on a character that's already decently geared, so you probably don't even need to really know the fight that much, because once you're 600 item level or above with even a slightly decently leveled up brand, this fight is very easy. Now, as mentioned, once you kill this boss, you have 2 chests to loot at the end, and both of those chests can give you a piece of Warbound gear for your alt, and all of this gear is going to be on the veteran track. That means it's going to start at 584 item level, and it's going to be able to be upgraded to 606 item level. Half the upgrades, so upgrades 1 through 4, only take Valor Stones and Weathered Crest, and 5 through 8 will also take Carved Crest. Now, since you're going to be doing this on a much higher geared character, probably being your main, you're also going to have reductions in upgrading your gear. So if you say go do this farm a bunch, get say half a set or even like a full set for a new alt, you'll not only have all of this veteran gear, but you'll be able to very easily upgrade it all because you'll have these massive reductions in the amount of upgrade materials you'll actually need. And because of the loot pool that this gear is pulled from, this can actually be much stronger than you would originally think, because this loot pool is the same loot that you would get from doing anything in the open world or any of the other delves. World quests, killing any rares, killing any random enemies that drop greens. So that means any of the armor pieces or weapons you get are going to have a random secondary stats, meaning you could just get like a weapon or a piece of armor that just has the best stats you could possibly get for your spec or the build you're currently playing, which is actually really strong because you could potentially even get better stat weights through this random gear than you could get from any, say, dungeon gear. But outside of that, a handful of the trinkets you can get from this is where this gear really shines, because 2 of these trinkets were actually used in the world first kill from Liquid. And outside of those 2 trinkets, there's also another really good trinket. So the trinket that wasn't used in the world first kill, but is still a really good trinket, is the Quick Wick Candlestick, which can be used by pretty much anybody because it gives you either agility, strength, or intellect as a main stat on it, which is already really good. Having a main stat on a trinket usually points to it potentially being really good, but the on-use effect is also really good because it gives you an increase to your movement speed by 20%, which is just generally nice, but it also gives you a pretty massive increase to your haste, and this buff lasts for 20 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. So this trinket is just generally pretty good and does sim pretty well on the majority of the classes or specs, and you also get that movement speed increase, so it can also help you in sticky situations or where you need some more movement. But there's 2 other very strong trinkets that, like I mentioned, were used in the world first kill of the Mythic Raid. The first one being the Candle Confidant, and only one person used this for the world first kill, but this trinket is so strong that it competes with or beats some of the best trinkets even at higher item levels. Now this trinket is only for intellect users, and the equip effect is your spells have a chance to bring the candle to life, summoning a waxen ally to light up your enemies. So basically all this does is gives you a bunch of main stat and gives you a chance to summon a candle that will help you in combat. And there's different candles that this can summon that'll do different things, but they pretty much either just shoot ranged attacks at enemies or go melee the enemy. And the reason this trinket's so strong is because these candles you summon do a ridiculous amount of damage. You can also optimize this trinket even more because some of the candles you summon will be melee. So since you're a caster, since it's using intellect, if you stay closer to an enemy when the melee candle summons, it won't have to move as far. So you can even optimize around this trinket more, but just the amount of damage that these summons do is completely ridiculous. And that's also why someone did use it in the world first kill. But then we have what seems to be the absolute best trinket you can obtain from this loot pool. And this is the Shadow Binding Ritual Dagger. Now something like close to half of the raid that got the world first mythic kill were using this trinket. This trinket is even so strong that people were still using it in the world first kill that only had it on champion track. And keep in mind, the champion track is normal raid item level. It was so strong that using this trinket at normal raid item level was better than using some decent trinkets from heroic or even mythic raid item levels. And this trinket gives you mastery as its stat, and the equip effect is engrave a ritual seal into your skin, binding you to the shadows, granting you some amount of primary stat. And it's quite a lot of primary stat, but there's also the downside of your spells and abilities have a low chance to reduce one of your secondary stats by some amount for 10 seconds during combat. Now this downside effect has a really low chance to happen. It's a random secondary stat, and this secondary stat reduction is right around the same amount of primary stat this trinket is giving you. So even when you get the reduction, the trinket is still giving you around the same amount of primary stat that's generally going to be better. So just the amount of stats that this trinket generally gives you is so absurd that this trinket still beats out most higher item level trinkets in the game. Only the absolute best trinkets from a handful of Mythic Plus dungeons and the Mythic Raid beat out this trinket that you could potentially be getting for one of your alts. And that's pretty much the entirety of this farm. You just have to get up to tier 8 delves, then you can go and infinitely farm Zekvir. Again, if you're a higher item level character, and by that I mean like 610 plus, which isn't actually super high, but if you're at that point, you can go do these runs in 2 minutes or less. And as mentioned, that includes entering the delve, getting to the boss, killing the boss, and then looting the chest at the end and leaving the delve. And while this farm is really good for getting a lot of this gear for your alts, it isn't necessarily better than just going and playing your alt and gearing up through that. So I'd probably recommend you don't just go farm this infinitely if that's what you're specifically going for. But I use this farm for Valorstone farming because it's the best Valorstone farm in the game. And what's also super nice about this is if you have your main or a bunch of other alts that are already somewhat geared up, farming Zekvir counts as completing tier 8 delves, which will fill up your Great Vault with 616 gear. And you only have to complete 8 total delves to get all 3 options in your Great Vault at the end of the week, and 616 gear is on the hero track. So you can go kill a Zekvir 8 times, which isn't going to take that long at all. Even if you're on a lesser geared character, you can easily still do this in under an hour, and you'll have your vault completely filled. You'll be farming up a bunch of Valor Stones, and you'll be farming up a bunch of veteran gear for any alts you may want to play in the future. This has helped me build up a ton of alt gear, and I'm just looking through and kind of checking out what different alt I want to try out right now, because I just have so much Warbound gear that pretty much any alt I want to go play will at minimum have half a set of veteran gear. And if I want to go farm this for maybe a couple more hours total, I could pretty easily have a full set of gear for most alts I would want to play. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.